Alright, so these are my top 5 moments of the EA press conference for E3 2014. Now, typically, I always feel that EA does pretty good conferences. I feel like, for the most part, all developer conferences tend to be fairly well done because they don't have to talk about we did this for our console or we did that because they don't have one. They just say, here are the games we've developed, and they just show us this is what we have coming out later this year, early next year, or sometime next year, possibly in 2 years. It's just early stuff. And in this conference, it was weird how pretty much every game was like that. It was like it's all coming out sometime in the future. There wasn't really anything that we saw that was really coming out except for Battlefield and Hardline, and everything else was just like it's, here's something for you, and then we don't really get any actual information on it. But I still think it was a pretty good conference. They still showed a lot of stuff that I am really excited for. It just kind of sucked that it wasn't, nothing was really demoed. Like, that was really, I guess, the issue I had with it. Everything was just prototype in-game footage, I think is what it always said. So it was an interesting thing to see for their conference because typically they have all this stuff like we have this, we have that, and it was just like it felt like it was really only like 8 games that they actually showed. They showed like a lot of the sports stuff, which was like that was the most done stuff outside of Battlefield, and it was like for me personally, it's just like sports. But these are my top 5 things that I enjoyed from the EA press conference, and here they are. Number 5 is Mass Effect. That is probably what we saw the least of, and that's understandable. I think we did get to see some prototype footage, and some things moved. We even got a Krogan roaring. He had a horn, so that was good. Mass Effect. Love it or hate it, it's Mass Effect. It's gonna be there. Personally, I love it. I'm excited for it to come out. I'm curious as to when this story takes place compared to the initial trilogy. That's for sure. I think anyone who is a fan of the original trilogy is curious as to whether or not it's before or after that because there's a huge lore in this video game. There's giant wars that have taken place and stuff that they talk about. So people do want to experience these wars, and of course we'll have all the species, or at least a lot of them, I'm sure. But who knows what's going to happen? And they say these are characters we've never seen, so it'll take place probably distant future or distant past. So they will have no relation. It'll just be little bits and pieces here and there, like, oh, that's familiar, that I know because I played the other 3 games multiple times a piece. So I'm excited for that. I like the footage we saw. It was weird to see the one planet they really showed off was oddly familiar, I guess is the best way to describe it. It just seemed like a typical dystopian type of like state. Like it just seemed like a place. It kind of looked like there was a freeway that broke down, and then there were just like little huts, like not even little huts. It was just like one place where that one Krogan was. So there are places here and there, and you travel. And it seemed like initially it was just this one planet, but then they specifically say that you do travel just like you do in the other Mass Effect games. But I feel like they add a lot more detail and a lot more of the open world aspect to the worlds that you go to because there was a ton of detail in that little bit we got to see. And it's probably going to be just like the other ones where you go somewhere and you don't get to explore like the entire planet. You get a big chunk of it though, and you get that in every single planet you go to. This is an important section because this is where you meet some character, or this is where you do some main story plotline in this specific or on this specific planet. So it'll be cool to see how that looks in the future. We got the N7 armor, so it is the character that we play as is going to be basically in the military just like Shepard was. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out and what other storylines they come up with, and I'm sure it'll be the same options. Like you can have the war hero thing or the orphan story, and it'll be great to see if we actually get to play as different races like we did in the Mass Effect 3 multiplayer, where we get to choose that it might not be a Krogan, and they could have already decided that it is only human because of the fact that the person wearing the N7 armor does look human, but that could have just been what they showed off because they didn't want to give anything away, which would be a very bad practice if it was, considering it's the premiere of it being a new Mass Effect, even though we don't really know where it is in the timeline. if they do make it where it's aliens, maybe they haven't considered that yet, which I just couldn't possibly believe because they have all this stuff already pre-rendered and things like that. They would have had to have considered whether or not they want to allow us as gamers to have an alien main character. So I don't know. It could be human. It could be one of the more slender alien creatures. It's obviously not a Krogan, but it could technically pretty much be anything else. It could be an Asari because the Asari are all women. They're all skinny. I haven't seen the fat one. It could be one of the aliens that's like Thane, and they showed a picture of him, which is why he's in my head. And it would be great to have a character like him because he was one of my favorites, even though we didn't really get to experience that much of him. I feel like it wasn't enough, but that was just, I won't spoil why we don't, but that was just his character, and that's how they wrote it, and it was cool, and he was a great character. We just didn't get a lot out of him after the second game. But I love a character like that, and it could be, I believe they're Solarians, like Morden, if that was his name. I can't really remember. It's been a while since I played, but it technically could be pretty much any race, and they because everyone's fairly skinny aside from Krogan. So I'm making assumptions. It could be another human. It could be an alien though. So we'll have to wait and see for that. But it has me excited. It's Mass Effect. I can't not be excited for that because I love the first three Mass Effect games. So that's my number five. Excited to see what they do with it. Love the bits and pieces we got to see. At least we did get to see something move. We saw the Krogan roar. That's more progress than just pictures. So that was something that probably the most exciting thing. That in the new, I guess, planetary travel system, it looked like it was just a giant wall of the solar system compared to like the orb that you look down into. And that's me just trying to pick out little things that I can to enjoy it. But that was my number five. And number four is Battlefront, Star Wars Battlefront, of course. How could you not be excited for it? They started off the conference with it, which was a great start. Once again, not a ton of stuff they could really show off, but they had a lot. They had more there, I feel, because there was a ton of stuff moving. They had the character get on the land speeder. They had ships flying through the air. It looked really good. It looked amazing, actually, and it's on the Frostbite engine, so whatever details they decide to put in there, I'm sure will be amazing. I'd love to be on, like, the Forest Moon of Endor and just going through trees and, like, you can shoot the trees and they fall over. That would be amazing. And it's not Battlefront 3. I believe it is basically a reboot or I guess sort of a remake of the first one. I'm not 100% sure. I think they're kind of doing half and half on that. But it looks great. They showed off Force Mode of Endor. Both look amazing. Excited for that because it's Star Wars. I wasn't huge into the Battlefront games. Honestly, I only played like the demo for Battlefront 2 when it came with the DVD version of the original trilogy. They had it where if you put it in your Xbox, you could play a demo of Battlefront 3, and I rode around on the land speeder and hit trees all the time. That's my only experience with Battlefront, but it does look amazing. I am excited for it. I'm curious to see what they do add to this game, what details they add as far as them using the Frostbite engine, as well as what story elements are they going to put into it, single player, how are they going to do the multiplayer, are they going to do big Battlefield style stuff with Battlefront, because even when you play by yourself, there are a ton of enemies and allies with you when you play those matches. It's like an actual war. So I'd love to see something like that where it's, I don't know, 32 people or something crazy, and they're in Star Wars and you get to use AT-ATs and walk and destroy things and stuff like that. That would be cool to see, but it was exciting. It was a great start. You can't go wrong with starting with Star Wars. They had the hum going on, and it's like, that's Star Wars. So it was a great start. Excited for it because it's Star Wars, and typically anything Star Wars, excuse me, is well done, especially when it comes from a franchise that has already established the fact that it's a good franchise when done right. So I'm sure DICE is gonna keep the tradition going, and they're gonna make a good third slash remake installment of the franchise. But that was definitely worth seeing, and it was a great way to start the conference, even though it sort of dipped and kind of came back up towards the end. But number three is the Criterion Racing IP. which we don't get the name for. It's just that new racing game. The reason this has me so excited is because what they compared it to and they did it visually was Burnout Paradise, which for anyone who's played that, you know how just insanely detailed the crashing was in that game. And for anyone who doesn't, it's very detailed. But that's just a really good game. That was, even though I only played the demo of it, I never actually bought that game. I love just playing around in that demo because they actually let you go around and do some of the multiplayer challenges, like do the longest jump and stuff like that. It was a fun game, and you get the crashes when you're going super fast, and it just you hit something hard, and it shows it, and it changes depending on where you hit it, and the camera angles look good. And in this game, it's racing with cars, four wheelers. They had planes. They had boats. They even had like the air gliding suits. I can't think of what they're actually called, but the glider suits. And they that was one of the pre-rendered things they showed, even though it was really like alpha stage. They didn't have everything colored in, but the one of the characters actually flew through. I guess it was some sort of tower or whatever, but they actually flew through this little piece, this opening in it. And I thought that would be amazing to see. And they have it where you can actually transition from one vehicle to the next. So I'm excited for that because they make good games. That you compare it to Burnout Paradise, that's gonna get me excited. I'm sure it got a lot of you excited, but you compare it to a great racing game that has great destructibility when you just hit something head on, and then you put that in with boats and four wheelers and gliding, which is insane to me, and helicopters. I don't know how you race in a helicopter, but I'm just gonna somehow transition from car to helicopter. It's gonna be crazy. I'm hoping at least, but that really had me excited. It was the one, I guess, really new IP that we got to see. Everything else was either rumored to be coming out or people just figured like it's not the franchise won't be over like in the case of Mass Effect. So this is really the only new IP that we got, and it was definitely good. I enjoyed it, like I said, particularly because they talked about how they really want to get the destructibility down and how crazy things are going to be when they're crashing. So I'm excited to get some real good footage of that and see some crazy races where people are going from car to boat to helicopter to like drive off a cliff and then just jump out and start gliding. I want to see stuff like that. So I can't wait till they actually get us some real good footage, get us a really, really nice trailer with some in-game footage and not just a CG trailer showing it off or showing off what it might be like, but some real in-game footage that'll be nice to see. But it was great to get a new IP out of this conference, and I'm not really huge on racing games, and I guess that's one of the things that also puts it so high on my list because one of the few games I do like that's a racing game was Burnout Paradise because it's an open world racing game, and it was just done right. It was done well, and I'd love to see that get even crazier with a ton of different vehicles. But definitely had me excited for that. That was my number three. Number two, pretty easy one, Mirror's Edge. That I love Mirror's Edge. I love the first game. Always wanted a second one. It was always one of those things like when you have a canceled TV show, it's like it's just not gonna happen. And then lo and behold, it's just like poof, it's a thing now. And unfortunately, we didn't get to see much. It was, like I said, the same thing for pretty much every game they showed. We didn't get much out of it. We got a little bit of the conceptual pre-game footage or whatever they were calling it, but the little bit we got to see was interesting. I really wish we got to see more, but I'm still really excited for it, not just because I love the first game, but because of the fact that this is one of those things, like, if Beyond Good and Evil finally came out, like, people want that game to come out, I think would be the same thing, probably much bigger, because I don't think Mirror's Edge has nearly as much of a fan base as Beyond Good and Evil, but it would be like that. You think it's not gonna happen, but Beyond Good and Evil 2, I don't even have to get into that, but this game kind of just came back to life. Hopefully it's amazing. It's supposed to be open world actually, which is something I read. I'd love to see that, but it definitely had me excited. It's my number two. It might seem like I'm not as excited as I am for the new IP thing, but if I had to choose, I definitely choose Mirror's Edge 2 over that because it's Mirror's Edge. I know that franchise, and they're making improvements on what I already thought was a great game. There were little bits and pieces here and there, of course, but it was a very unique game for the time where you're first person running, first person parkour, and they're up in the ante on that. And if they do this whole open world thing, I just couldn't imagine what that would be like. And who knows if they're gonna add multiplayer in some aspect of this game, whether it's through the story and they kind of take that aspect out and separate it into its own multiplayer thing. Who knows? But Mirror's Edge 2, definitely excited for. Like everything else, no real information on it, just footage here and there. It comes out eventually, but enjoyed that. And before I get to my number one, of course, I have my honorable mentions. I actually have a couple for this one. The first one was the Bruce Lee in the UFC thing because Bruce Lee is amazing. So it was like when it started off, I initially thought it was Mirror's Edge because it was the footage of him talking about you have to flow like water and stuff like that. And all I was thinking was like, if you start off with Bruce Lee, bitch, you better have some content. So they did okay. I mean, I'm not huge on UFC, but it was cool. Bruce Lee's in the game. They had him win the fight, which also I was like, you can't like show Bruce Lee in this and then just make it where he loses. So it was good that he did, and it was cool. He did some jumping off the cage, and he won the fight. It was Bruce Lee, so honorable mention for that because it's Bruce Lee. My second one was the NFL stuff and them just doing the camera angles. The only reason that's an honorable mention is because it's like them doing that type of stuff at a conference is the only thing that makes me even remotely have interest in sports games. So I thought that was interesting. Them talking about the dynamic camera angles and all the new player emotions when they like tackle someone on a good play or do a good tackle or make a difficult touchdown. And it's just honorable mention because it was like, man, that just looks good, but it's just because it's a video game to me. Honestly, I have no interest in sports. And then, excuse me, my third honorable mention actually ties into my number one, so I would just mention what my number one is, and that is, of course, Battlefield Hardline. And the reason it's my number one is because with Battlefield, it's like the competitor to Call of Duty. Neither of those games have ever really held much interest to me. If you saw my Microsoft top five, I talked about how Call of Duty, it's always been single player more than multiplayer for me because I like the crazy action packed movie type storyline. And then you get multiplayer and it's just like pew pew and it's nothing. There's none of that over the top stuff. It's just you keep dying and people cuss at you. And that's it. And then Battlefield, I never really got into it because honestly, no one is that into Battlefield that I know. So I never really played those games. I played the demo or I played the beta, I believe, for 3. And the big thing about it, once 3 started to come out, and it's been like that every year, them with the destructibility is huge. And of course, they demoed that this year. And what caught me off guard was the fact that it's not just like, oh, here's just another military version. It's like a cop drama type version. And as soon as I saw that, I thought this is instantly better than the other versions because that was just another army storyline, and this is like a more down to earth storyline. Even though they're all going to be crazy, because I'm sure it's going to be some ultra super crazy heist, but it was much more interesting to me, like the whole cops and robbers type aspect to it. So that was really cool. And then the honorable mention from that is the fact that one of the guys who worked on Dead Space is actually working on this game, so they have multiple references to Dead Space in this. And the first one was, I guess they were at an airport or mall or something, and it was one of those stands where it just has multiple ads on it, and one of them said Ishimura, which is the name of the ship from the very first Dead Space games, the USG Ishimura. And I was like, that's an amazing reference because Dead Space is one of my favorite franchises. And then when they went into showing off the multiplayer, which I think is cool, it has sort of a weird TV type thing going on. I enjoyed that, and it was like someone was clicking through the channels before it went into the gameplay. And one of the channels went past Dead Space, and it was showing the USG Shimura from Dead Space 1. So that was those were my honorable mentions, because it was like, I love Dead Space, and they referenced the Shimura. That was cool. But Hardline definitely looked amazing. I love the cops and robbers aspect of it. I love the multiplayer that they showed off. I love it whenever they show that stuff off because it looks amazing. They have buildings falling down, which they did, and I believe one of the things that people didn't enjoy was I'm I'm not sure if it was the Battlefield 4 demo or 3. It might have had to have been 4. But the whole crane falling thing, I think they had that, or it was like the building falling down in the demo for Battlefield 4. That didn't actually ever happen in multiplayer. That was supposed to, but it didn't actually come to light until, like, I don't know if it ever actually happened, but it was supposed to be one of the big things that took place. Like, you could take out a building, and that never actually happened in Battlefield 4. So I think they corrected that, and they're like, look, we're gonna put this stuff in there. We're gonna let you guys play it and be able to like knock this crane over, which destroys this building, and then you can actually run through the sideways crane up into the second floor. And it was really well done. I loved how it looked, the whole cops robbers aspect of it. It was still some of the same stuff. I mean, you still had like, oh, here's your big truck. It's just like an Escalade with a Gatling gun on top, and not just a camouflage army truck. But it was still really cool. It had the same sort of style to it, but certain things were different. Like for some reason they had stun guns. I don't know why robbers would ever have that, but you can stun people and you can get arrested, which I thought was funny when the player that they focused on was running through and like someone next to him got arrested, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. You can get busted and basically it's game over. And then I thought like that wouldn't happen. You'd be toast. It would just shoot you right in the face. But that was just a random thing I noticed. Like, no, you robbed and shot a bunch of cops. You just bam, you're gone. But you can get arrested, and that could have also just been for the demo. But you can get busted and get arrested by the cops. But they had a lot of cool stuff. I love the part where they were in the tunnel, and it was just like with Battlefield 4 when they destroyed the pillar and the tank came down. They blew up they like tossed a grenade and it blew up the wall. A bunch of it came crumbling down, destroyed the cars, and the freeway just came down and they just drove up the ramp. They just drove up it like a ramp, and that was really cool. And of course, them destroying the crane and the building just crumbling, and most of the building fell over too. It was actually a very long sequence. I thought it was just gonna be the crane falling into the building and it would open some stuff up, but it hit. A bunch of the smoke came down, which really changes the aspect of the gameplay because no one can really see anymore, and if you're one of the robbers, it makes it easier to get away. So that was cool too. But I loved how it looked. It caught me off guard because I thought it's just going to be Battlefield going up against Call of Duty like it is pretty much every year. And this actually has me excited. I might even get it just because it's a cool cop type story. And honestly, one of the biggest things I thought of when I first saw it was Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2, which is that's really just racing, and that has no guns in it, and it's just cops versus robbers. You just, as the cop, you chase the robber, and as the robber, you escape the cops. And then you put that into Battlefield with weapons and stuff, and you can blow up the street and make someone fall, and so you could capture them, or they fall through the ground, and then another part of your team captures them. That was really cool. So it was exciting to see that. Also amazing that the beta's already up. When they announced that was really cool. It was also smart because them having so many issues with Battlefield 4 was like, hey, we know we screwed up. Boom, here's the beta. And I think it's only up for about 2 or 3 weeks. It might be up for a month or so. But I'm going to try to log in and sign up for that on PC. But it looks cool. It was great to see that they had the beta up, so they like announced the game officially because it leaked a little bit beforehand. But they officially announced the game, and then it's like, we have the beta already set up. You guys can sign up. You guys can play it here. Give us your feedback so we know how we can fix this game in the coming months before it actually comes out, which, if I remember correctly, is actually at the end of this year. I don't think they announced that at the conference. I might have missed it if they did. But I did hear that, and it's coming out later this year. So those are my top 5. Of course, comment below, let me know what your top 5 is. Do you agree with mine? Do you disagree? You can put your top 5 or top 10 if you want to, if you like that much. I feel like